This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. All right, so the Browns actually have some news to talk about today. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go through a little bit of Browns news. We're going to start with some of the lightest news and then move up to some of the bigger stuff. So the light news is the Browns signed Brady Breeze. They cut a kicker. They had like a fifth string quarterback on. These are just bottom of the roster tryout moves. The only reason I really wanted to talk about it is to kind of talk about something that's going to be happening pretty soon here. And also just to make sure, like, because there are people who see Brady Breeze got signed. They might not be the most familiar with the NFL landscape, and they want to know if this signing is a big deal. If you are wondering that, I'm here to tell you, this is a tryout guy. He really hasn't played much in his NFL career. He's at the bottom of the roster. If for him, it would be a massive win if he makes the practice squad. That's the level of signing that we have here. And just a warning, don't get carried away with a ton of the signings that the Browns make over the next few days, because, well, not just the next few days, the next few weeks, because the UFL season is now in their postseason. If you don't know, the UFL is the spring league that goes on during the off season. And after the regular season ends, there's usually a little bit of a rush for some teams to sign players that were on some of the rosters of the teams that did not make the playoffs in the UFL. But after the UFL championship, which I believe is in a couple of weeks, there is another rush of signings. So that rush of signings will cause a lot of players around the league to get cut, brought back on, and then the Browns might bring somebody on who got cut from a team or bring somebody on who was on the UFL. There's just going to be a lot of bottom of the roster moving around over the next few weeks because of the spring football season ending. So I wouldn't invest too much thought in some of the bottom of the roster moves that the Cleveland Browns are going to engage in over the next few weeks, because it's just that time of the year, especially right before you get into camp and you lock in and you send guys to West Virginia. Now let's talk about DTR. And DTR is a weird one, right? Because he went on injured reserve literally at the end of the year. So you were like thinking it was just a formality that he was on injured reserve, and then you get back to the spring and you're realizing that he's actually like still injured. Good news on his front. His hip is on track. It seems like he's going to be back. He was throwing at practice earlier this week. And look, for DTR, he need to get back from this injury as fast as possible. Like, I don't know where he is at, but if I was DTR, I would definitely feel like my roster spot is in jeopardy. Like, I don't care what anybody says. Tyler Huntley is not here to harmlessly be a camp arm. Like, that dude was a backup for the MVP and a good backup for the MVP for the last few years. That guy is not here to just hold it down for you while you come back. So if I'm DTR, like, yes, that hip needs to be on track. And then you need to come out and ball during the training camp period, because if he was going to miss like a preseason game or two, that's not good for DTR. He really needs to get healthy, not necessarily for the Browns' sake, but for his own, like, staying in the league or staying in a favorable spot in the league. Because, you know, if you're a 5th round pick and you are no longer on the team that drafted you, it's 50-50 on what happens next with your career, whether you get signed to be on a practice squad, whether you get a legitimate chance to play again, whether you have to do the spring league route or something like that. Like, once you're a 5th round pick and you on your second team, the odds aren't great, right? So DTR, the sense of urgency, good thing he's getting back healthy, on track. Hopefully he could be back so he could compete during camp for his spot, because it's a tough competition, man. Tyler Huntley is no joke to battle at that third quarterback spot. So good for him. All right, let's get to the main news of the day. Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry have been extended. Now, this this has been a weird saga because most people have known and understood that this news was coming, that Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry would most likely, most certainly be getting extended. There was like a vocal minority of people who were like trying to wonder why it didn't happen super fast, or if Kevin's job was, but we all kind of knew, the reasonable of us, that Kevin and AB were extended. And that's really good news. Now, it's not the only reason why this is good news, right, is that they got extended. The reason why this is good news is that you have good people in the building and they got extended, right? The stability is key here. You found a good GM. You found a good head coach. Having those guys around, I mean, that's obviously a good thing. If you look at the rest of the AFC North, everybody in the AFC North, head coaching wise at least, has a head coach on their second contract. I believe it's true for executives, but I'm not sure about Omar Khan. I think Omar Khan is not in his second contract as the general manager of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's been with the Steelers organization forever, and the same thing could be said for the GM of the Baltimore Ravens, but I don't think he's at his second contract as general manager with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But nonetheless, the continuity in this division is what sets it apart. It's been what sets it apart, right? The AFC North has had, well, for a while, had the same three coaches since like the 2000s, right? With Marvin Lewis, and Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh, right? Like those three were holding it down for a whole era of football as the continuity kings in the division. And that led to the reputation of the AFC North being built because so many of the teams were stable. It just so happened that at the bottom of the AFC North existed the Cleveland Browns, where we were the opposite of stable. But now that hole has been plugged, the Browns are stable. They have a general manager, a head coach, and a president of operations in DePodesta that they have invested in for a long period of time. This going to be tough. Like, this division is just going to be tough for a very long time. All four organizations are at a relatively good place. Even a team like the Bengals, who gets ragged on by me for being cheap, they're not a bad organization. I think I talked about them being like the Guardians, right? Where the Guardians are a good franchise. They just don't spend a ton of money where you want them to spend money at times. And that's kind of what the Cincinnati Bengals are. They're just not the cash riches of any franchise. But they're still a good franchise. It's still a team capable of getting to the AFC Championship game. They're still a team capable of getting to the Super Bowl. They're still very, very good at football. The same can be said for the Baltimore Ravens and obviously Pittsburgh, who has been kind of known as one of the better, well-ran franchises. The Browns, the Steelers, the Ravens, the Bengals, they're all ran really well. And not all 32 teams are. So when you have 4 teams in one division that are ran well, you're just going to have a lot of good football being played, and it's just going to be the toughest division. And it's going to be the toughest division to play against, right? If you're a team that has the AFC North on your schedule. So the continuity is key there. Kevin Stefanski is the first coach to get extended for the Cleveland Browns since Romeo Crennel. The same is true for Andrew Berry, who was the first coach to get first general manager to get extended since Phil Savage. Now, it is worth pointing out that both Romeo Crennel and Phil Savage got fired after signing their extension. The big distinction between Romeo Crennel and Phil Savage, between Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, is one, multiple years of success. Romeo Crennel was kind of signed off of a fluke 2007 season. At this point, Kevin Stefanski has won 11 games twice. If you want to say it's been 2 flukes in 4 years, sure, but come on, like 2 Coach of the Year awards. Obviously, this is much different than Romeo Crennel. Same could be said for Andrew Berry. Obviously, this is much different than Phil Savage. So I don't expect these guys to be moved on from. It seems like ownership is very excited about what the future is with Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry and DePodesta. So this is going to be what it's going to be. I mean, look, the Browns are pretty much set. Like, I think if all goes well, Kev's going to be the coach for quite a while, and Andrew Berry's going to be the general manager for even longer. And I think that's how the Browns organization is setting up. It stinks that this is happening in a division where it doesn't really give you that big of an edge on your competition because everybody else in the division is pretty set, right? And I think that's why the Browns spend as much money as they do, because they had to find a way to separate themselves from Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Cincinnati into one area that they have to their advantage versus those teams is a willingness to spend, because Pittsburgh is a family-owned team still from the old school NFL days. Same thing is true for Mike Brown and the Brown family and the Bengals. And then you have DaCosta, who has money, but he don't like to spend that cash on the same realm as Jimmy. So I think that's why Jimmy has resorted to just spending as much cash as possible to kind of separate himself, because he realizes continuity is not going to set you apart in the AFC North like it would for other franchises. And even if that continuity is great continuity, which I do believe it is with Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, still not going to set you apart from the rest of these teams. So what can? Money. And I think that's why they've been investing so much in money. So the stability is important. The Browns have to find a way to separate themselves from the rest of the AFC North. We'll see if they can continue to do that. And what's next for the Cleveland Browns? I would look for an Amari Cooper extension during mandatory OTAs. If Amari Cooper comes, well, he should come to mandatory OTAs. I think they'll try to work out an extension for him. I would think it's going to be somewhere around $22 to $24 million a year, somewhere in that range of money that Nico Collins just got over like 2 or 3 years. And I think they'll get that extension done. Then they'll work on the Watson restructure. I know a lot of people are wondering why Watson has not restructured his contract yet. I think the reason Watson has not restructured his contract is because they don't want $40 or $50 million of cap space available when they're negotiating these contracts with some of these players, i.e., they don't want Amari Cooper's agent to look at the Browns cap space and say, hey, you can give him 30 right now. Why are we doing these workarounds, right? They want to be able to save that and maybe even get a little creative with it, which means they have to work out terms with Deshaun Watson for down the line. But I think the Amari Cooper extension probably happens first. After the Amari Cooper extension, then you might hear about a Watson restructure at the beginning of camp, probably at the start of like padded practices or something like that. But that's what's next on the docket for the Cleveland Browns as far as like what they're going to do front office wise. But yeah, Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry have been extended. We all kind of expected that this would become official sooner than later. So it's good news on that front. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.